get. Okay, we are starting, but we're going to let people just start to filter in. I always find that first like 3 minutes are people hopping in, trying to figure out if their Zoom is going to work, or like some of us have to live in the browser instead of the actual Zoom platform. Sometimes it gives people trouble. So we're going to give people a few minutes to kind of filter in and welcome everyone who's already coming in. We do have the chat enabled. So, and in fact, I'm going to check and make sure that the chat is actually enabled, because I said that on the last webinar and it was not true. So I'm going to look and make sure everyone can talk to each other. You should be able to talk to anyone. Oh, good. Oh, good. Someone said, you're silly. The chat is enabled. Thanks, Troy. So we are going to get going. My name is Meredith Schweitzer. I am one of the communications supports for Hyperspace Challenge. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And hopefully we'll get a few more people trickling in who will have missed our intro, but I think they will survive. We are talking today about how to make the most of your SBIRs. And giving people some real insight into kind of how to capitalize on things once you've been awarded, but also how to think about things as you're applying for them. And I am going to let everyone introduce themselves. But before we do that, I want to remind people again, if you just joined, the chat is open. We'd love to know like where you're watching from, maybe the company you're with, anything that you want to share. If you see each other, I know the Hyperspace Challenge community is pretty tightly knit. So if you see someone that you want to say hello to, please feel free to keep that chat going. We do have the Q&A function as well. So if you have questions, today we're going to let the panel kind of guide us through some things for most of the conversation, probably for about 40 minutes. And then we are going to open it up for questions. So we don't lose your, hi, Michelle. So we don't lose your question in the chat. Please put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll be kind of checking the Q&A as we go to see if we need to pepper some questions in, but we will save some time at the end as well. And if you are new to Hyperspace Challenge, this program is really a wonderful program to get involved in, and you are now on the email list if you hadn't already been on the email list. So these webinars happen about every 2 weeks. There's an annual program as well, really geared towards breaking those barriers down between government, commercial, and academia, to make sure that people can take advantage of all of the opportunities that there are within the growing space industry, and to really advance and accelerate technology and innovation. So it's a great group to be involved in. If you're not following their social media, you can find them mostly on LinkedIn. And we'll pop those links in the chat later, and as well as our panelists' LinkedIns most likely. And that's probably the best place to find each of them. So with that, I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for the conversation. So I'm going to move into introductions, and I will just go around my little screen and let everyone just say, you know, where you're from and a little bit of background on your particular affiliation, and then we'll get going. So I'm going to start with Charlie. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hey, everybody. I see a lot of people on the chat that I'm familiar with, so nice to see you guys. I am in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I support the Space Systems Command front door, but I have a lot of experience at the Air Force Research Lab, over 15 years. So kind of bringing that aspect as well as into this conversation. So
Great. And Tara, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. Tara Gattis. I am the Vice President of Government Affairs here at Orbital, Sidekick. I've been with the company about 2.5 years now. We're headquartered in San Francisco. I'm actually visiting some on the East Coast, on the West Coast today, but I'm based on the East Coast. Prior to joining Orbital Sidekick, I was with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency for about 20 years. So most of my experience comes from government, actually, which makes it a very interesting dynamic for me here on the outside. And looking forward to sharing our journey with you all.
Tara, what year did Orbital Sidekick go through hyperspace?
It was 2019.
Okay, so you had joined by then.
No, I didn't join until 2022.
Oh, yeah, that math makes more sense.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, you guys are a great example of sort of how to capitalize on what Hyperspace Challenge offers. So hopefully we can get into that as well. And also if people are listening and want to talk to someone about what ways that the program, you know, has helped an organization, you're a great team to talk to on that front. Jareth, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Major Jareth Lamb. I'm the current Deputy Director for SpaceWorks. Prior to that, I also ran the Space Ventures branch, which executes the SBIR program for the Space Force. So we've got a bunch of upcoming solicitations, both for phase 2s and STRATFI TACFI. So here to talk about those programs, answer any questions, and yeah, great to be here.
You can tell this is really a powerhouse of a panel. So I really encourage you, if you have questions, like definitely take advantage of the time that we have with these folks. We're just going to dive right in. So I thought we'd start, Jareth, with you, if you're okay with it, to kind of give an overview of, I think, you know, most people who are on the call, if you don't know what an SBIR is, that's probably where you want to start, and we're going to go with a baseline that people do know what an SBIR is. But maybe you can give an overview of kind of how how you all, especially at SpaceWorks, are thinking about SBIR opportunities, and just kind of what the overview is, and maybe some things that are often misunderstood when you talk to people who maybe it's their first time going out for an SBIR.
Yeah, so a little bit of 101, if you will. So I think hopefully most people on the call at least understand SBIR as Small Business Innovation Research. And a big focus, at least from the Space Force perspective, is how do we tap into this, you know, innovation that's happening in the commercial private arena and bring it into Space Force operations. It is not a charity, right? We're not giving out contracts to give out contracts. The end goal for us is to be able to take that innovative technology and transition it to real world space operations. And that's where the SpaceWorks team really comes into play, in helping companies navigate the bureaucracy of government acquisitions and DoD acquisitions. So that's where we provide value. So things like hyperspace, things like our own accelerator incubator program within SpaceWorks, that's what we're geared to do, because we recognize that the government is not an easy customer. We are very difficult to work with if you've never done it before. There's a lot of vernacular, a lot of regulation and rules that if you aren't familiar or haven't worked in that landscape before, like, you're just going to be lost, especially if you're a startup without a ton of overhead that, you know, you can spend millions of dollars on business development and all this other kind of stuff. So that's where we come into play. So, you know, phase 1 and phase 2 SBIRs are a great opportunity for small businesses to at least get their foot in the door a little bit. And it gives them a whole host of other acquisition benefits. You know, they're able to essentially go sole source and things like that. So SBIR really is the perfect mechanism for companies looking to kind of break into the defense market. I'll pause there and see if anybody else on the panel has anything else to add.
Yeah, Charlie, do you have some additional like overview kind of thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
No, I'm sorry. I was just thinking, no, I think Jareth did a great job. You know, I think one of the benefits of the SBIR is what Jareth pointed out, is it's sure there's some seed money to get your tech matured, but really it's more about that personal side, right? Like, you're going to build a whole bunch of relationships. You're going to have some inroads that you've created with your TPOC and your program manager and whatnot that will help you guide through the chaos of the government bureaucracy, which is really what Jareth was calling out, right? To go on it, to do it on your own is overwhelming. So like being able to leverage the SBIRs and hyperspace and other type of innovation hubs, that's powerful, right? To kind of use those and tap those relationships.
So on that point of like, it's hard to go on your own, what and maybe this is still for you, Charlie, I'm wondering, you know, we talked in the pre-interview a lot about getting a good relationship going with your TPOC and that sort of thing. But if you're a company that you've never gone out for an SBIR, like where would you have people start? What would you have them work on and really get, you know, or what kind of steps would you encourage people to take?
Oh, if they they don't know where to start. So, I mean, I have to humbly pitch SSC Front Door um, as an option space. So yeah, there is a website. You can Google it. It's not an easy link, otherwise I'd tell you. But just Google SSC Front Door. There's a really big yellow button that says connect. The whole intent of that website is to help you connect with people on the inside of the government. We are not a funding agency. That is not our intent. Our intent is holistically to connect people that could be with folks from like Hyperspace or Callis Campus or SpaceWorks. It could be with operators, because we have Spock and Spacecom also in the network, right? So it really just depends on what you're bringing to the table, how mature you are, what questions you have, or what connections you've already made, because we're really trying to expand upon what inroads you've already created. I also find, you know, just ending up in places like Q Station, for instance, if there's a local hub where people are hanging out. I know I'm in and out of there. A lot of the government folks are in and out of there as well, because let's face it, like the base is not the most friendly place to hang out just in general. So like being in a creative new space is a great way for government people to get out of their holes, but also to connect with those people and just have, you know, coffee conversations, water cooler conversations. And then I would say, you know, start, you know, anybody you can find. I would say AFRL tends to be pretty open in the sense that, and you're probably going, no, they're not. I don't know who to call or where, but AFRL publishes a lot of papers. So like any public conference that is AIAA, IEEE, I can guarantee you there is at least one AFRL paper there. Google those papers, find out who they are. Their email addresses are pretty easy to find on those papers. Ping them, because AFRL tech folks are like wanting to find the latest and greatest thing. I always tell people, engineers at AFRL don't want to solve problems that have already been solved. So if you solve that problem, that saves the government money, but it also saves those engineers time, right? So reach out to those folks.
Jareth, do you have anything to add on the on sort of the in-person or the networking? I mean, Q Station, for people who don't know, that's like an Albuquerque-based resource, physical location, and I know you're kind of East Coast based, or sorry, West Coast based. I wonder if you have some thoughts on that kind of in-person connecting. And then Tara, I have the same question for you too. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, one of the things that we try to make a concerted effort to do in AppWorks and SpaceWorks is to get out where industry is, and things like conferences and some space symposium coming up in a few weeks, AFA, SFA. We always have a booth where we have our SpaceWorks and AppWorks team members there just to answer questions, establish kind of that initial relationship with companies. And that usually leads to follow-on discussions, you know, where we can help kind of coach them through the SBIR process, whether it's, hey, they're just getting started and they're trying to compete for a phase one, or hey, they've got their phase one, now they're looking for customer and end users for a phase two signature, or STRATFI, TACFI and beyond. So strongly recommend, you know, if companies are looking to meet with folks either, you know, within the ecosystem or just in general, I mean, these conferences are huge opportunities to do that.
Tara, do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to what Jareth and Charlie mentioned, in particular for OSK, one of our investors also steered us towards a defense accelerator at the beginning of this process. So I would say don't overlook your investment, like your venture capital side, if you're getting funding that way. Some of those folks might have some connections as well to help you out. And in addition to like the SSC Front Door and SpaceWorks, AppWorks, SoftWorks, those things, which are excellent resources, as they mentioned, a lot of government agencies also have those type of things. Particularly the intelligence community has a couple. So some Google foo here can also help you. But I don't disagree that conferences and like events like this, where you can reach out to folks, are some of the best ways to get started.
Love that. This is coming up in the chat is sort of like, oh, that someone put me in touch with the wrong person. And, I'm not sure what to do there. I'd love to have you all talk about, we had a long conversation in kind of the pre-interview about how to do that work on your own of understanding who the customer is and what the challenges really are. And I think I want to say it was Charlie, you were talking about, go and go see what JPL is doing, go see what certain organizations are doing so that you can do a little bit of the legwork before even doing that first outreach to maybe a front door, saying like, hey, I see that this, this group is researching XYZ. I have technology that could solve for that. Who should I talk to next? Like, can you talk through a little bit of that, how you recommend companies do a little bit of that legwork to understand the customers and the differences between, an SSC need versus like a NASA need versus a DoD, the different arm of the, all the different agencies, because not all SBIRs are created equal, I guess, in terms of what that organization is looking to address, right? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I would say, at a grand scale, all of those agencies you mentioned, NRO, NGA, and NASA, SSC, Space RCO, they're all
you can do your bingo card as we're going.
Yeah, yeah, they're merit badges. You get to collect them all, and you might get a box of cookies at the end. So they are all posting out strategic documents, right? They have to. It's kind of how they get their money, right? They're creating these strategies. Usually they're 5 to 10 years out. I encourage everybody to kind of Google those. For instance, one of the big ones that all of DoD is operating off of is the operational imperatives, right? There's 7 of them. And so knowing those and understanding how your a space for in our case, we're having a conversation around space fits into those operational imperatives, but more so how your widget could fit into that operational imperative is useful to start, again, having that conversation. There's 3, again, knowing your customer. So you're going to have an operator, right? An operational user. That's different than the acquisition arm. So a lot of times people conflate the two as a single person. No, it's, one person's wearing the shoes and another person's buying the shoes. That's how I like to say it, right? And whether the requirements are met that's a different conversation for a different day. But so yeah, so Spacecom, SPOC, those are going to be more your operational focus, right? Spacecom supplying kind of the operations and what the force looks like and how they fight the fight. SPOC providing the actual operators, and then SSC, Space RCO, and SDA, Space Development Agency, not Defense, Space Development Agency being your 3 acquisition orgs in space. So knowing them and knowing their job jars, I think, again, Google those, right? So SSC has program element officers. That's the other big thing to know about is DoD uses program element officers to do all the procurement. Those are usually a level 6, a colonel, right? Full-bird colonel. And so sometimes a general. So knowing who those people are, understanding, usually they're in the press, understanding what they're talking about in the press is really important because that's what they're looking for. How can I meet this need? They're the pathway, I like to say, into the future. They're trying to forecast for you. Here's what you need to do, and here's where we're trying to go. So yeah, it is a little bit of Google research. I wish I could tell you, oh, go to this website, it'll have all your answers. I like how Tara's like, no, don't do it. It doesn't exist. But yeah, just start digging, right? Because the answers are out there. They really are. I would like to say or think that the Space Force is being a little bit more vocal and upfront about what they need. And so we're catching up with NASA. I like to say NASA is the grandiose vision of, where Space Force should be or want to be with getting out there and articulating what they do and how they do it. But yeah, Google is your best friend in this case. And then, you know, the more you can tie all that into your conversations, the better whoever you're talking to, they might say to you, oh, that's not a good fit for me. But because you were able to clearly articulate what you're doing and how it solves a problem, I know who does that. So, and they can help you make that next connection. So the more you can fit into the puzzle, the better we can get you connected to the right piece, technically, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a lot of information, like some seriously helpful thoughts in there. I'm curious from Tara, on your end, because you guys have gone through this process several times, you know, how do you stay current, you personally within the organization, like how do you stay current with those lines of who we should talk to, where we should go next? Like, how do you kind of manage that as a startup?
A lot of time, actually. It is very difficult because not difficult, I would say, but it's there's a lot of turnover sometimes. Although we're lucky that like Jareth has been at SpaceWorks for almost the entirety of our time dealing with them. But again, the importance of conferences never go away, because if I was going to Space Symposium this year, I'd be seeing both of them, just touching base. And I usually, you know, if you have a really engaged TPOC or allies at like one of the SpaceWorks, AFWorks kind of entities, they'll keep you up to date about replacements and who's coming in. It's really about just basic network maintenance, right? Like there's never going to be a website, like Charlie said, that gives you all that information, but you kind of have to take it upon yourself to check in with your folks periodic basis, maintain regular, meetings with those folks. There's no like magic bullet there.
It's networking. I always say to the people that we work with, you know, there are a lot of industries that have gone fully digital or very digital, but the space industry is very personal and in person. Like you can't underestimate the power of talking with someone physically on the ground. You know, it's interesting. And you're right, like conferences is really a great place to just have everyone in one spot. And if you're watching this and you missed our conversation 2 weeks ago about how to make the most of Space Symposium, it's on the Hyperspace Challenge website and on their YouTube channel. And there were some great little pieces of information about how to kind of capitalize on that conference in particular, which is like the who's who, right? I know I'm preaching to the choir. And in fact, while we're at it, Jareth, do you know the booth number for AFWorks SpaceWorks at Space Symposium? Quiz time.
Oh man, I probably should know it. It's a massive booth. It's all of AFRL. SpaceWorks and AFWorks have a portion of it. Yeah, just peruse the conference hall, right, and find us, and feel free to swing by. I'll be there. The rest of my team will be there. Looking forward to meeting as many different, new space companies as possible.
Great.
And I'm going to do a shout out. Like, I think the one whole row basically at the conference center is like space acquisition, SSC, AFRL, space RCO. So just like it's against the wall. They put us in the corner, just go down there. I know for SSD, there's conversations, I want to say on the hour with an SML or PEO who's going to be there. So go there, listen to them talk. You'll be able to hear what they're interested in, and then maybe potentially pull them aside for a one-on-one. So yeah, walk that lane for sure.
Okay, let's get us back to SBIR. So I'm curious about one of the things we talked about was in the pre-interviews was you have an award, and how do you really make the most of it? Because really, the funding is great. The non-dilutive funding is huge. The fact that you can keep your IP is amazing, right? And in fact, is that true? That's true, right? You keep your IP. Huge for companies, but those are just like baseline, right? So what are some of the things that people don't think about that once they've been awarded, they should be doubling down on, or they should be taking advantage of, or they should be, exploring further. And I'm not sure who this is best for. Maybe start with Charlie, go to Jareth, or Jareth, you start.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. So the thing I would recommend is, companies rightfully so spend a lot of that time and the resources that are given focusing on technical maturity, right? Maturing their technology, getting over various TRLs, because that's what the SBIR program is primarily intended to do. I would also recommend that you use that time to overcome the bureaucratic and regulatory hurdles as well. If you're working on a software application, the ATO, or the authority to operate, is going to be your biggest hurdle. It is not your tech maturity, honestly. I think that will come with time. It's If you don't start that ATO process, 2 years in advance, you're never going to get it, right? And you've got to have a TPOC that's going to willing to champion it within the various ATO review processes and things like that. So that's just one example, but every widget has some type of certification or approval that it has to go through. Focus on that. If you can start that, maybe even at a phase one, or especially at a phase two, from day one, once that contract's awarded, make that a primary focus for your team. You're going to be that much more likely to be able to go to a strat or TAC or a phase three, even directly post phase two.
Charlie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so again, I always say leverage your TPOC. The biggest thing there that I think is an untapped resource, Jareth alluded to kind of the ATO process, which is the software side, but there's the hardware side, right? Which is, how do I raise my TRL with verification and validation test? AFRL has a huge lab space, Aerospace Corp, MITRE, SDL, so UARCs, FFRDCs, we're all connected. Leverage those lab spaces. Reach out to your TPOC and say, hey, like, I have this widget, it's ready to go in a thermal vac. I get it. Things like thermal vac 5, those are expensive for you to procure on your own. We pay people and we keep these labs in place and in working conditions so that we can do those types of tests. So leverage those, again, as Jeff was saying, to move your technology forward. But it also, again, gives you another perspective of connections, right? Beyond the TPOC. Now you're getting into the techs who are working day to day, who are harnessing things, who understand how to build hardware together and integrate at that level. They might be able to provide you additional insight. Oh, well, this is great, but if you could change this connector, for instance, you'll meet this MIL standard, right? So there's these little like pathways that and nuggets of information that you'll gain from asking those questions. The other thing I learned recently at New Space Nexus was a lot of times there's local dollars also, or state dollars associated for R&D or SBIR awards. So look at your state level and find out if there's additional funding that you could potentially procure just because you've acquired a SBIR from SpaceWorks. So I found out, like, in New Mexico, you can get another, I think, $250K on top of your SBIR award just for being a company in New Mexico working on space hardware and has earned a SBIR. So like, that's huge, right? Another 250K is a big bonus. So yeah, those are kind of the pieces I would, probe personally.
The state resources, that's a great suggestion that I think a lot of people don't think about, just kind of being a multiplier of how you can kind of leverage it to multiply government funding that's not within the agency that you're specifically working with. So Tara, do you have some thoughts on that from Orbital's kind of experience?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to what my fellow panelists already mentioned, there's a couple once you're in the SBIR process, once you're engaging with your TPOC or the lab spaces or a program management office, it's a great time to start building your knowledge base about the government. And that sounds like really basic, but it's things that can change. So your number one nemesis in government is reorgs, right? Because they will throw everything you understand about it, will just throw it up in the air and you're like, where does everybody fall? So just basics of knowing the budget process, like your TPOC should be able to help you understand like a budget planning cycle, when program of records are going to open up, the unfunded requirement process, how to shake out the couch cushion. So all of that is valuable information as you mature through your relationship with the government past the SBIR into more program of record level contracts. So I would just say never underestimate how much information you can get from regularly engaging with the folks that are on your SBIR with you.
And we have kind of some questions from the audience here that sort of align with what we're talking about. This might be directly, well, actually, I'm not sure who this is for, but this is from Carol. She's saying for StratFi and the Valley of Death Challenge, which I want to talk about in a second, how do we identify the program of record and its funding to integrate new innovations? So who has a good answer for that? Because that feels like
Do we want to plug the front door, maybe? So again, it goes to knowing your government customer a little bit. And yeah, reorgs are very challenging because things get all shifted around. But the Space Force has identified PEOs for each mission area. So if you're building something that has to do with SATCOM, Mr. De La Pena is your PEO, and he's going to have an SML underneath him who's responsible for procuring your type of technology. But again, if that can be a challenge still, even to navigate, I'll just throw a plug in for the SSC front door. They'll be able to connect you to the right folks.
Yeah, I think one thing to know is, people like to think that we're always procuring. I will say, having been in the acquisition process, be aware of the RFIs that are hitting the floor, and people are probably scratching their head. Why would I ever respond to an RFI? There's no money in that. RFIs precede the RFP. And so what the government is actually doing there is understanding the market space. They're doing their market research, understanding what's available. They're getting their feedback. So when they write the RFP, it has your language in it. And so there was one just out for GPS, what are they calling it? GPS Lite, basically a proliferated MEO GPS constellation that De La Pena is going to go after. There's another one coming out for direct to device, so 5G, right? So these are things that, again, the government is signaling, hey, we want to have these conversations. SpaceWorks is doing a great job of trying to align their funds with reverse industry days, because again, that's the PEOs coming out and saying, we know that commercial could potentially solve this problem, or this is a hard problem that we believe that commercial could solve. SpaceWorks is following that up with challenges. Again, trying to get the industrial base ready. So when the program of record lands in 2 to 3 years, hopefully, that we have the technology that we require and can acquire at that point. So that's really important. The other thing I would like to say on that is, I know everybody in the room doesn't want to talk about the primes, but I know I've talked to many of the primes and they are interested in your technology. We are not great. We, the Space Force, other than SDA, are not great at procuring products, right? What I'm saying is we might say we want the Humvee, but we're not going to buy each hubcap, each tire, each bolt and integrate that. I like to be open and honest that we at SSC are poor integrators. So let's just air that dirty laundry out. So who are our integrators? They're the primes, right? And nobody wants to admit that. That's the elephant in the room. So have those conversations with the primes. Again, answering those RFIs allows us to understand, like, what should we be putting in the RFP? That signals to not just the primes, but to you guys, what we're looking for. So it's kind of this OODA loop, right? But, be open and have the conversation. Again, going back to symposium, every PEO is having one-on-one conversations. Some with primes, a lot of them not with primes, because there's very few primes, right? And so getting those opportunities to kind of talk about your technology, and again, being very concise about where it fits and how it plays is going to be very important. Maybe Tara has something else to add to this conversation. No,
I was just going to say that's a great point. And that gets back to understanding who in government you're going after, because that prime issue is not unique to SSC, right? There's a lot of that goes on in a lot of different places. And so knowing, you know, pursuing industry partnerships is very important, especially if your technology is very, can only address part of a bigger problem. Because to Charlie's point, like you're going to have to partner with somebody else to sort of present an integrated, it doesn't have to be the entire thing, but it needs to show some integration with other pieces. So in the past, we have partnered with folks on various proposals, and they've always gone further with a partner than they are on your own. Yeah, I think that's it.
Learn how to play nice with others.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I think Tara brings up a really good point. You don't have to necessarily partner with a prime, partner with another small company. And again, together present a holistic force. In the case for Tara at OSK, they are a sensor, right? How many times has Tara have you heard that, hey, we Space Force don't buy sensor data, right? We procure analytics. Well, if Tara wants to sell her sensor data, she needs to partner with an analytic and or create the analytics in-house. So like that's how you get to the end state. So yeah, always be open to that.
That's hugely helpful, I think, for people to understand that it's like you need to know your own tech and your own where you're going yourself, but more importantly, like how you're networking into the greater systems, you know, and which companies are doing what. It's more of this like research work, you know, of just getting to know what's out there. You know, one thing that is in a similar vein of people kind of missing the mark, maybe because they think, oh, like they do buy sensors, but they don't, you know, is, can we talk a little bit about, there are different, so there are ways that SBIRs are kind of reviewed. And Charlie, you and I talked a little bit about the three kind of categories that things are ranked on or that are reviewed on and that sort of thing. And that it's often not the technical capabilities that people miss on, that they get, you know, down marked on, because we all know our tech really well, right? But people do miss in these other kind of categories. Can you speak to the importance? Can you outline kind of what are the things that get real attention, get really reviewed? And where do people miss? Where are people kind of like, well, you got down marked because, you know, you're not doing X, Y, Z. Can you talk a little bit about that? And Jareth too, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jareth is probably a little better at answering this. But Jareth, correct me if I'm wrong. The three categories are technical feasibility, commercialization, DoD utility. Is that correct? Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
So again, as mentioned, Meredith mentioned, you guys are great at describing your tech. Like nobody knows your tech better than you. And sometimes you know it better than even we can interpret it, right? And that's a whole different discussion. How can you relay that to someone who's dumber than you? Especially like cyber for me. So if you're gonna come to me with cyber, just know that. Black magic. But the other two areas, commercialization, I know, for instance, if you're coming and saying we are a dual use capability, we're going to look for, is there actually a commercial market in that space, right? How is your product going to be used by the commercial entity, right? Broader world, you know, like maybe Tara, like in the case for OSK, they're looking at gas leaks, right? And so we know, okay, that's a real thing that's happening in the real world. They need to monitor these pipelines. They need that data. And this is a way to solve that problem. So if you can't show that commercial market or potential of that market, maybe it's a way to say that, then we're gonna kind of scratch our heads a little bit, like, because we don't want to be the sole owner or provider or purchaser of this technology. And then the third thing is the DoD utility. So again, that goes back to what we were talking about originally. Do your research and understand who your customer is. Why would we need that? How would we use it? Why is that important to the DoD right now? The better you can describe that narrative, the more likely you're going to get good points in that area. So Jareth, I'll let you add into that.
Yeah, no, what I'll say is the biggest hiccup I see with a lot of companies in their proposals when we're doing our evaluations is they don't clearly articulate that defense need piece and how their technology integrates within the larger force architecture. you need to have an understanding of how we operate, and what our current architecture is, and how your technology is going to make that more efficient, more effective, at the operational level. So, do not just repackage your standard pitch deck, if you will. You've got to tailor it to the person who's going to be doing the evaluation, which could be a lieutenant from a space operations squadron, or a lieutenant or a captain down at AFRL. So they're going to have some familiarity with technology and things like that, but if it doesn't speak their language, that a lot of that's going to go over their head, or they're going to miss it and they're going to mark it down, right? They're not going to see the utility from their perspective. And so if you can do that, and throw an OB1, or Google it if you're not familiar with an OB1 is, and show how your widget, your technology, fits within that larger operational picture.
Tara, do you want to add anything on this sort of set here?
Yeah, actually, and just to pull that thread a little bit more, Jareth, is that's where talking to folks at conferences can help you. Before you even get into application space, ask about that. Ask anybody that'll talk to you about, hey, so like in our case, as Charlie mentioned, we are a sensor. We provide remote sensing data, but we know analytics is the way a lot of people want to go, right? So it's like, well, do you have like an API, or are you doing some sort of unified data lake? And, what does that system look like? And so Phil, if you can find a technical person anywhere in one of these conferences to talk about how to integrate your tech, take advantage of it and ask like a million questions. And the other thing to ask about is this particular infrastructure a program of record, or is this an experimental infrastructure? Because sometimes you'll be working towards integrating into like an API format that isn't even really accepted by everybody. So you have to be prepared for shifting sands, even within DoD and different services, about how they're integrating their, I'm speaking from the data experience, not really hardware, but that changes a lot. So these are all things that you need to keep on your radar to kind of keep the pulse on as you move forward, ideally before you're doing a SBIR application. But even if within your application, you can say, well, I can integrate with this system, or, we've designed our APIs to match this government standard. Any of those kinds of details that you can show that you've been doing some research can even help. Let's say that.
A sort of follow up to that is we did a conversation, this was like a year ago, on VC funding, and one of the women said, if you've had an exit, I want that to be slide 1. Like, that's the information that I want to know at the very top. Like, I'm curious from you all, in the applications that you review, this is probably Charlie and Jareth really, the applications you look at, or sort of advice you give people, what sorts of information are like, put that in, put it at the top, make it the most, visible. If you don't have that, you're out, immediately. That's sort of in the line of where a VC would say, I want to know if you've had an exit. That's a proof to me that you have gone through this process and have been successful. What's in the similar kind of vein, but for a SBIR application,
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by trade, so that I tend to hone in on the technical piece a little bit. In something that I think AFWERX and SpaceWorks are particularly wary of is vaporware, or things that are, someone can write a really great proposal but not deliver actual technology. So I like to look for, have you ever built anything before, right? What is your pedigree? Whether it's, did you, the key personnel on this project, did they work at a previous company and actually deliver something? I'm always, kind of got my BS detector up when I'm reviewing these, because it's, because we do get a ton of proposals, and there have been situations in the past where companies have been able to secure millions of dollars, and ultimately, it was a shell company that was never even planning to actually deliver something. So that's something I'm always on the lookout for, and our teams are, I think we've gotten a lot better because we've, brought in a lot more rigor into our review process. But that's something for me, is just, have you built something? Show me that you've at least, have you built a prototype of this in a lab environment or anything like that, just to, give me a semblance that this isn't vaporware. That's kind of my big focus area.
Yeah, I I am also an engineer. However, I always ask myself first and foremost, so what? So what? Like you're bringing this thing to me, so what? That sounds kind of mean, but like just because you can invent it doesn't mean it should be invented, and more so that I should pay for it to be created, right? And so what is the thing that you're building and who is going to be affected by it and in what way? Is it better, faster, cheaper? Is it new, novel? Is it going to change the way we do business, right? So what are you bringing to the table that is different than what I'm doing right now? Especially when I think about SBIRs, they should be leaning forward. They shouldn't be fixing the things that are broke right now. They should be what is the next best thing in 5 years from now, right? And we definitely in the government don't have that answer 100%. So we want your ideas, but tell us why we would want that idea, right?
Yeah, it sounds basic, but we work with so many companies where that so what question, we call it like leading with facts and features, you know, that you've got your facts and features down, but that like what are you contributing to? Why does it matter? Is kind of is a harder thing for a lot of companies to articulate.
Can I ask
oh,
Tara real quick to just jump in on that? Because I know as her TPAC, we worked a little bit on that because a lot of people in the Space Force didn't know how to spell HSI when Orbital Sidekick came to the table, right? And so, Tara, maybe you could just provide a little bit insight into how that fed into your progress and SBIRs and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I will say that HSI is a huge barrier to entry, especially even within the government remote sensing expert community, of which I came from, right? I did not use a lot of hyperspectrals. So this is where having a really good champion early helped my predecessor and our CEO sort of look into relevant use cases. And once people kind of understood how to break it down into how can it help a tactical mission, how can it help an operator, you know, that was a lot of legwork on our part, but it also was talking to sort of the hyperspectral experts within government and understanding how they use it today. Now, a lot of those mission use cases are classified, and we're not doing classified work yet, but it's basically just taking that commercial use case, which we had a very strong background in, and looking for the applications that were useful for DoD. And that's one of the reasons I came on board, right, is to kind of help that process. But again, it just goes back to really taking a chance to talk at the operator level. This is where the operator level is very important for your tech, because these are the people who are going to be using it on a day-to-day basis. And so for me, I'm in there trying to talk to the analysts who are providing insight to the decision makers. I'm like, what's the process? What kind of pieces of information are you missing? Like, and then figuring out with my analytics team, like, hey, can we possibly provide any insight into this problem that for years the government hasn't been able to solve? I don't know if that's the thread you were pulling, Charlie, but at the end of it, if you've got a tech that is sort of very esoteric or very niche, it's on you to help them figure out how to use it. And then it kind of snowballs, because once you have a couple good use cases, people start thinking about other ways to use it, and then it can be more collaborative.
Exactly. Nope, you hit on it.
I have one more, and then I want to do kind of a rapid fire from the Q&A. So we talked about, you've gone through the whole process and you get awarded but not funded. I think I'm saying that wrong, but you get selected but not funded, right, is the term. Talk to us about, don't just give up. What do you do then? What's the next step when you see selected but not funded? What do you do?
Yeah, so that's a program that AppWorks and SpaceWorks offer, right? Because we don't have an infinite budget, but we get more quality proposals than we have available budget to spend each cycle. So we offer that as an opportunity to other people within the DoD. If they want this and they have money, they can fund it. They don't have to recompete. We literally send them the proposal documents and they can go directly to award. And we've seen some success with that across various agencies in the Space Force. People like SDA, the Space Development Agency, look at our selected not funded and peel a few of those off each cycle and fund them themselves. It is somewhat of an education challenge. People don't, within the government, like a lot of folks, program offices aren't even aware that this is an option to them. So for the companies, I would suggest, bring this up with your champion or your advocate. Say, hey, we were selectable, not funded. If you've got money, it's this easy. And it really is that easy. I know a lot of contracting officers out there that, it sounds too good to be true. It's like, what, I can just take this proposal and award it, I don't have to compete, I don't have to do any of this extra paperwork. No, it really is that easy. So for companies, have this in your hip pocket. Don't look at selectable, not funded as a showstopper, because there is still opportunities to get funded. And even if that falls through, submit to the next cycle. Maybe polish your proposal a little bit, take some of the feedback that you've received here and through other interactions, and resubmit. Like I said, budgets are ultimately limited. It's an extremely competitive program with about a 10% selection rate currently. So don't get too jaded. Just keep coming up to bat, and hopefully eventually you'll be able to secure that win.
Anyone else have something to add on that one?
No, well, maybe a little bit. So the thing you're gonna try to tap into, again, Jareth kind of already mentioned, reach back out to your TPOC. A good TPOC's gonna know where there's hidden pockets of money. The biggest pot of money is the UFERS, right? That potential, like, and this year is gonna probably be a big year because it took us so long to approve the budget. So people are gonna have problems obligating and expending funds. So there is like a cycle towards, the June, July timeframe where, and each org is different, where, the leadership goes, show me the best ideas that you have that you don't have money for. And they go through a whole nother selection process on let's fund those things. And I know I've worked with Tara and OSK to even get a UFER for additional hardware on some of their spacecraft. So is it going to be 100% award rate? No. But again, leaning on your TPOC, they're going to be one of your biggest advocates. They should know where to find those sources. Even Jareth was kind of mentioning there is like this communication problem even in the government. They should be able to communicate to the contract officer what's going on and how to leverage, the work that SpaceWorks has already done with your proposal to get a contract awarded, all of those things, because frankly, everybody is looking for the easiest way to get funding out there and obligated. And so, yeah, just keep knocking on the door, maybe is the best way to say that.
What does UFER mean again?
Unfunded request.
Unfunded. Okay. Okay. Are you ready for rapid fire for lightning round?
Sure.
Okay. Can you do more than one direct to phase 2 submission?
Sorry, I didn't mean button. So we have limited it to one submission per solicitation. So each cycle, you can only submit one. And there's a bunch of reasons for that rule. But yeah, right now we're limiting it to one per solicitation.
Okay. Does SpaceWorks have a partnership intermediary, a PIA?
We do not personally, but we leverage AFRL RV, the Space Vehicles Directorate's PIA with New Mexico Tech. So we do by proxy.
Charlie, do you have anything to add there? Okay.
No, you guys, AFRL has a couple PIAs, right? So yeah.
Okay. Are the correct MOU forms posted for the direct to phase 2 with Spacework AFWorks, and are the deadlines for signatures from the customer POCs ?
They are posted on the AFWorks website. If you go to AppVentures Open Topic, you'll see the updated templates for the upcoming phase 2 solicitation that launches April 26th-ish, I think. So yeah, it's all there.
April 26th, get it together, people. Get ready. Okay. What's the minimum TRL for SSC front door? What do you look for as a minimum TRL?
We start seriously considering staff around TRL 5 or 6. There are some kind of bridge programs at the TRL 5, 6 level. we really start considering TRL 7 and above for program of record type things.
Jareth, is there a difference for, I mean,
So yeah, so like when you're usually talking to the front door, you're at the phase 2 level, which is that 5-6 arena. So for phase 1s though, we'll look at 0, 1, 2, 3, right? It's feasibility analysis. Is this something that's actually even viable, right? You're doing a study essentially. So as far as our entire portfolio of programs, it's 1 through 7. But if you're starting to talk with the front door or looking for a customer or an end user, you need to really be at that 5-ish TRL for people to take it seriously.
great. Does DoD fund R&D and procurement of sole source tech that is not of US origin?
So that can be a very complicated question, depending on the technology area and ITAR and all this other kind of stuff. So so the boilerplate answer for SBIR is that it is a program established by the federal government to bolster the domestic industrial base. So you have to be a US based company. The research has to be done in the US. You can partner, let's say you're a foreign entity, you can partner as long as you're doing less than 49% of the work, but that work still has to be done in the US. And there's a whole host of other like edge cases and guidance on this if you go to SBIR.gov, as it relates to foreign technology, foreign employees, and things like that. There is usually a way to make it happen, but you just have to be compliant.
Yeah, and at the actual acquisition level for O&M, there is a little bit more leeway than what Jareth is talking about. We have, well, a government to government procurement processes, but also like US government to foreign commercial. There are pathways. That is going to be totally dependent on the country which you're operating in. And there's certain rules and regulations that we already have pathways for procurement. So for instance, Canada, that pathway is very easy, relatively easy to procure Canadian tech from Canada for the US government. India is the pathways are not quite, for instance, there yet, but they are coming. So it just, like Jareth said, it depends. And so I wish I could tell you, like, yeah, it's really easy to procure, but we have at SSC a whole international affairs office that's their only job, is to create those government to government ties between our allies, but also to work with the commercial entities in foreign countries to figure out how to create like procurement processes. So.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. We've got 2 minutes left, so I want to give a second for like some closing thoughts here, but I want to thank everyone who attended. If there are follow-up questions, I know we didn't get to everything in the Q&A. If there are follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to Hyperspace Challenge and we'll try to connect you the right way we can. Or you can reach out to these folks by finding them mostly on LinkedIn. And we do these webinars about every 2 weeks. So just look on hyperspacechallenge.com for the upcoming webinars. And also now you should be on the email list if you're watching this live. So you'll also get information that way. And I want to take a second to thank our panelists and to thank all of you for the really good questions. I mean, I think this was a great example of how you can come to the table with things that you really want answers to, and we're going to try to facilitate getting to those answers. So with that, I'd love to see if there's any other thoughts that you all want, maybe one piece of advice for companies that maybe we haven't done yet. And I'll start with Tara.
Thanks, Meredith. I would say don't give up, that the journey from SBIR to program of record is not a straight path. It can be very meandering, and there can be, much like a game of Candyland, a little bit of detours at times. So just be persistent, especially if you're getting good feedback from operators and program managers that your tech is viable. You just got to find the right fit.
Great. Thank you, Tara. Jareth.
Yeah, I'll just put a plug in for our website and AFWorks Spaceworks, is that we're a resource. Our job is to help you, right? Our job is to make the government a more approachable customer. So please, there's contact forms on our websites. You have my contact info. Any random question, if you just want clarity on something as simple as what does your TAC-FI submission need to look like, either myself or somebody on our team will get back to you pretty quickly, because at the end of the day, that's our job. We want you to be successful. We want capability and technology to actually transition out of sitter land into real world operations. So please don't hesitate. You're not bugging us. Like I said, it's our job. So take advantage of the resources that are out there.
Thank you so much, Jareth. And Charlie, you want to do one last piece of advice?
Tara took mine. That is not a linear process, but that's okay because I know everybody wants to think, oh, phase 1, phase 2, TAC5, Strat5, program record. It's that easy. My other piece of advice is like lead on your TPAC. Like this is their role. Like I loved being a TPAC. I really enjoyed making those connections, figuring out where pieces fit in. So you know, they just like Spaceworks are there to help transition and help you find the pathways and the use cases. So like absolutely your TPAC is your best friend and you should buy them drinks. No, I can't say that, but but definitely lean on them and get their support.
This has been so helpful. Thank you all for, giving such good insights, and we're really grateful to you, and hopefully we'll see you as attendees for some of our webinars in the future. And for everyone watching, thank you all so much for actively participating. I think there was some really great information in this one, and hopefully it was helpful, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everyone. Bye.